You're listening to Ecosysteming, the podcast redefining economic development through the lens of equitable entrepreneurship, 2 decades in the making. Join NC Idea's Thom Rue as he engages with entrepreneurs and experts who are challenging the status quo and driving lasting change.
Welcome, everyone, to the Ecosysteming podcast. I am your host, Thom Rue. Today, I am joined by a legend. And when I say legend, a man with many well-earned titles that span from executive chairman, board member, co-founder, chief executive officer, and president, Mr. Farad Ali. Thank you so much for joining us on the Ecosysteming podcast.
What's up, Tom? Thanks so much for having me, man. I don't know where you found my name to get this opportunity to speak with you, but I'm glad you got it from the bottom of your jeans and you gave me a call. I'm so happy to get a chance to connect.
Oh, the pleasure is mine. I mean, it's usually pretty obvious in these podcasts that, I have some rapport or friendship with the person we're talking to. I frankly consider myself lucky to count you among my friends, here in the ecosystem. I as a matter of fact, I was going to ask you, do you recall when we first met?
I think so. What you don't know is that I think I remember you when you were in your role at in Ohio.
Oh, at Jumpstart?
At Jumpstart.
Or when I was at Kauffman Foundation in Kansas City.
Well, Kauffman, I think I ran across your name and saw you because there was a lady there at Kauffman. Her name, I can't remember her name. She was a professor that I met at one of Jim Johnson had a reunion of a bunch of professors. But then the second time Jumpstart, I actually went to Jumpstart to the guy Daryl that ran. Was it Daryl?
Yeah.
I went to Ohio to look at it, and experiment, touch it, feel it, and all of that.
As a matter of fact, we brought him here in 2019 to speak at our summit because of the great work they were doing there in Northeast Ohio to bring equity into the economic development process. And okay, you know what? I thought I was clever in teeing this thing up. I don't even remember those. I was going to say that in market, once I got down here, I think our first meeting was over pizza and whiskey at our office because I was like hosting these very informal conversations with like 6 or 7 distinguished gentlemen, and you were among them. And like the sales pitch was like, "Hey, I'll buy pizza," and I don't know how we landed on having whiskey as part of this, but whiskey and pizza goes together, right? And I think you dropped in, and somebody introduced me. One of the regulars introduced me to you at that first session, and I think that's my memory of when we first met in all earnestness here in North Carolina.
Yeah. I'm not a memorable kind of guy, but I remember you earlier. But so now when you came to playing, that was the time I remember us really getting the chance to communicate. And we probably met on the streets before, but I think that's the time we got a chance to have some in-depth conversation about the opportunities in our region.
Well, I mean, it's exacerbated by the fact that we're both so shy, and it takes a little bit of effort to pull us out of our shells, right? So,
Correct.
As a matter of fact, I remember more recently, there was a couple of weeks ago, that's actually a couple of months ago now that I think about it, we were hosting a session with our Black Entrepreneurship Council upstairs. We are in the NC Mutual. For listeners that don't know where our offices are located, we are in the historic NC Mutual building in downtown Durham. Proud tenants of Provident 1898, the preeminent Black co-working space here in Durham. And so we were holding a meeting with the Black Entrepreneurship Council upstairs. And I was talking to some folks, including there's, I think, 2 of my board members there. And I feel this big bear hug from behind. Like, well, this better be somebody I like because this is getting awfully familiar. And of course, I was thrilled to turn around and see that it was you. So that's just perspective for the listeners, lest that be not obvious. Now, in all seriousness, I do want to take a minute. I want people to understand why I'm so hyped and just so happy to be talking to you, because you are all, false modesty aside, you are a man of considerable accomplishments. You're the current executive chairman for Associar, a telecommunications company, no less, headquartered in Plano, Texas, with offices here in Durham. You're on the board of directors for the RTP Foundation. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. You're a board member of the Latino Community Credit Union and board member and a past chair of the Research Triangle Regional Partnership, RTRP. That's a mouthful. You are in a lot of important places. I don't want to lead the witness here and say why I think that's cool or important or why you should do that. So why don't I let you in your words explain, why?
Yeah, Tom, I'd like to share with your listeners about this. So, a little bit about me is like I grew up in in a place in New York called Brooklyn, and didn't have access to a whole lot of things, and was first generation college. And my dad moved from Brooklyn, and where he worked for IBM, to the Research Triangle Park when they opened up down here. And the Research Triangle Park um, was a new environment for me coming from the streets of Brooklyn. I thought, I grew up on the place near Prospect Park, in Parkside Avenue in Flatbush, and that was probably the most trees I've ever seen. When we flew from LaGuardia into RDU, I'm like, oh my God! First of all, the airport looked like a trailer, and second of all these trees. I thought we came to a park to live. And so that environment allowed me an opportunity to be as being first generation college,
Proud Tar Heel, right?
proud Tar Heel, went to school at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I got a chance to see a lot around social capital and how networks work. I got some of that when we moved to Durham. We actually moved into a modest home in Hope Valley. It was Hope Valley adjacent. Let me say that. And that gave me an opportunity to meet people who were more fluent, who had more wealth, and to actually see how they, worked together and lived together and played together. And coming from the city, that was a skill set that we had from birth to be able to survive, right? You had to always know your environment and to maneuver around your environment to survive in your environment. Well, those same skill sets came really helpful when we came to North Carolina, because while it was a safer, more Pleasantville environment, I did get a chance to see a different kind of game. It wasn't a game to survive; it was a game to thrive. And so I realized social networks are important. So having the ability to go to the high school in that community, and then later on to go to college, which is only 10 miles down the road, it gave me the opportunity to kind of understand how your network is really critical to your relationships, and those relationships are critical to what you do next. And so being on these boards of directors allowed me to clearly understand what's happening in the community, and then how I could be a part of the community to take my networks to a deeper space and to make change. And the whole idea is, how do you become a change maker in a way that allows for people to be better off?
Yeah, I mean, social capital, a big part of social capital is just access, right? And the fact that it sounds like you figured that out at a fairly young age, maybe with a certain social awareness you developed in that wonderful place called Brooklyn. Um, and that those skills served you well when you came into the mean streets of Chapel Hill, where you had to really hone those survival skills. Obviously, I'm kidding, but so let's dig deeper on this, right? So that you have these vantage points of all these boards, plus being just an overall successful entrepreneur. Matter of fact, I think I left off on your CV here, your consulting practice as well. So you've got that acumen of just being a bona fide, entrepreneur. And you see this here. So with all of that being said, let me ask your opinion on something. Economic development. If I say that to you, economic development, what the hell does that mean to you?
Yeah. So thank you for such a big question.
We're all about big questions and big answers on the Ecosysteming podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So economic development, um, in my perception, it's three things. Economic development for me is first human development. Like, what are we doing to build human beings to be better off, right? Which really speaks to our involvement in ensuring that they are able to be economically mobile and giving skill sets and talents that allow for them to take care of their families. The second part of that for me in this kind of spectrum or this the way you move through the chasm is to really look at um, workforce, like in jobs, and how do you go from being ready as a human to being employable, building something, creating opportunities for others, either as an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, or as an employee or as an employer. And then the last thing for me, economic development is community development. It's like, how do you give back to your community so that you can continue to fertilize and put seeds in the ground for others to grow and to go through that same. So that circular motion for me is really economic development because if you can build the people and then those people can build their own economic sustainability and then they can give back to their community, that circular motion continues to be like a snowball and it can grow into a glacier and really create an economic development conversation with people of how things grow.
But how does any of that serve the best interests of large corporate titans that we try to attract here with massive incentive packages? Because, like, I thought everybody understands that economic development is bribing big companies to move to your location. They don't talk about human development or the words we use, as it relates to the entrepreneurial mindset, human flourishing, right? I think we're saying the same thing,
Yeah.
right? We want to empower people to flourish and not just live, but thrive. I forget, you said it even better than I. But, and of course, I'm being tongue in cheek when I say that because I am trying to challenge these conventional norms, right? Like that
Yeah.
we just do frankly, out of reflex, out of habit. And North Carolina is not unique to this. Every state in the nation is addicted to these big corporate giveaways in the name of, attracting business, and they'll wrap the jobs. They'll put the jobs cape around their shoulders
Yeah.
because that's the one thing you always the two things you hear in every announcement, right? They're going to invest $1 billion and they're going to create 4,000 jobs. And I think that is such dishonest advertising because let's talk about the investment piece. They're going to invest $1 billion. They're building a factory. Okay. That's not a community asset. Our daughters are not going to a dance recital in the glass lobby of that beautiful new headquarter on a Saturday afternoon because you're going to get shot if you try to get past security. Right. So how is that a quote investment? That's a cost of doing business. I mean, on the corporate balance sheet, like, that's legit. I'm not, but it's always sold as like, oh, the state or the city is getting $1 billion of investment. No, they're getting some, of course, because like there are laborers who are going to have temporary construction jobs, right? And there's going to be some percentage of that build out that will be injected back into the community, but the vast majority of that's temporary and it's never at the price. And again, it's not a community asset. They're not building us a factory of happiness. It's something they have to build if they're going to sell their stuff. And then the jobs piece is the other half of that. Now that's legit. I got no qualms with that, right? But my little sick, twisted lizard brain does this every time I see one of these announcements. I take the number of jobs, I ignore the investment piece of it. I take the number of jobs that are promised, and then I look at the total of the financial incentives that have been offered. And I take that number and I divide it by the number of jobs promised to get admittedly an imperfect, but a cost per job number. And it would if you've never done this, I highly recommend it. It'll blow your mind. I have seen some of the most egregious deals that are out there, and you can find them by Googling them. It's something like you can see them as high as like $400,000 per job promised, right? So if we're putting out 400,000 for a job that's promised, and even if it's a $100,000 job, the taxes that are going to be deferred for, I mean, a lot of these deals get decades to do the ROI on it. So tell me, in what world does that make good sense? Farad, I need you to explain it to me because I'm a simple man of average intelligence. I am just not smart enough to see the benefit in this. So please explain it to me. Make it make sense to me.
So, Tom, I'm probably going to go a little off script. Not that we prepared for this at all, but I think it's important to understand the impact of political people in politics. What you just said was really a root cause analysis of the politics of economic development, which people are trying to sell to the community something so they can feel confident and feel like they're being responsible with dollars that they're getting from public dollars and making smart investment. And I would say dig deeper. I think it's time that we help our political partners better understand economic development so that when they speak to incentivizing businesses to come, that they incentivize the businesses to come with an outcome that builds the community, not sell the community. Do it with them, not through them, right? And so you take that model and you say everything that you just said, and I go, that's interesting. So let me tell you what they did in New York in Bedford-Stuy, where my dad worked at IBM. So Bedford-Stuyvesant was one of the toughest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, and the president of IBM came to Bedford-Stuy on Gates Avenue and built a building. And this is back in the 70s. And when he built the building, he made a commitment to hire a large percentage of the people from the block, if I may say.
I understand.
What he did was that commitment translated to having people who may not have had been gainfully employed, but employed, get an opportunity to go work for a major corporation, to get benefits, to be able to start saving money, to feel empowered. When they came to the community and did that, that changed the mindset of the people in the community. And they started feeling like they were participating in the American dream.
Yeah, if you see it, you believe it, right?
Right. You start believing it. And so when you start talking about economic development of that building, was not, he didn't say, I'm just going to bring jobs. I'm bringing jobs to that community because I want that community to be a better community, because if that community is better, I'll get better outcomes from those people because I'm showing them I'm investing in them. My building value, of course, will go up. My results will be great. And then they offered incentives. If you see, they recognize that the people in that community had talents that were unmined. So they said, if you uncover some efficiencies in your work while working on the manufacturing line, we will share the portions of our savings with you. And so I saw my family get jobs that probably wouldn't have gotten those jobs at IBM. I saw my aunt make a suggestion around, instead of having all these cords be around the floor, why don't you coil the cords together with a zip tie to make it safer and easier? And she got a bonus of like $50,000 or $100,000. She wouldn't tell us, but it was a bunch of money. And she moved out and bought a brownstone. And that was the core that got my cousins to go to college, which showed my family that college was now attainable. So it changed generations of opportunity, which was economic development. But it took someone in 1968, 1972, the vision to say, we're going to build a plant here. It's going to be productive. We're going to change the community. And the economic development from that move was massive, because not only did they make money, create jobs, build a community, but they actually invested in the world and the space and the air for other great things to happen. So I'm a byproduct, and my children and grandchildren are beneficiaries of a man making a decision in 1968 to come to Bedford-Stuyvesant on Gates Avenue to open up a plant that changed generations. That's economic development.
You're making a point that I do less eloquently when I say, people have asked why we are, especially today, right, in the current political environment, we are grounded by equity. Everything we do is equity first lens, and I'd like to think that we live those values loud and proud, right? And we're not shying away, especially not now, right? I think this is when we actually need to step up even a little louder and a little prouder on that. But when I'm pressed on this, I say, there's the humanistic side of me that says, man, it's the right thing to do, right? But then if I can't convince you, and let's face it, let's be real on this discussion, right? Some people are not moved by that argument. They don't care, and I'm going to keep it polite and leave it there. So then for them, when I sense that I'm talking to somebody that's, unmoved by that, I try to flip the coin and say, okay, you claim to be an intellectual person that cares about data. Then let me make the argument that it's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. You get a better yield. You get a better return. You get innovation, right? I mean, your aunt is the godmother of why we have zip tie cables, like in any application, right? But for that decision you were referring to, that doesn't happen, right? And there's a lot more formal data over the decades that have come out and said, diverse communities that focus on inclusivity are more resilient to change and shocks to the system. They have, better standards of life because, diversity actually gives more to everybody to enjoy and engage. People are more invested in their communities. You don't have the disenfranchisement and the disinvestment in communities. Like, people care, they look out for each other. It's on every level. And I usually make that argument on both sides of the coin, just depending upon who I'm talking to say, okay, now both these sides. It's the right thing to do and it's the smart thing to do. So what's your argument for opposing it now, right? Because if you're opposing it now, it's for really dark, malicious reasons that typically don't withstand the light of day, and they typically send people running and hiding again. And it's maddening to me, but like I said, we are proudly committed to equity. It's kind of where we start. When I started almost 10 years ago now, you would know this because you've been around for a while, right? Great organization, but it predominantly benefited, two white dudes from, we always say tongue-in-cheek, Duke or Carolina or State, with an app that fill in the blank. And then they would get, once they got their seed grant from us, they'd be, bathed and made prettied up for the capital stack that was here so that they had deal flow, and off they went. And, it was not intentional for any nefarious purposes. It was just a byproduct of the way technology-based economic development evolved in this country.
Right.
So I can have some grace about that historically, and I don't want to, Monday morning quarterback that. But when I started, I knew, from data standpoint, that diversifying would be the better way to go. And so fast forward to the present, 70, whereas 90% of our money went to white, males in the triangle predominantly. Now 70% of our funding goes to women, minority, and rural. And not because we're putting the thumb on the scale. We do not penalize white male applicants. We don't say, oh, what we've done is we've invested millions of dollars in ecosystem partners across the state that exclusively help historically underserved groups and marginalized groups. We gave them capacity building funding so that they could plus them up, right? Give them that, make them more competitive. And we've leveled the playing field, because for too long, the argument in economic development has been, under fairness and, don't intervene. It's like, you know what? You look over here to this field, there's a bunch of kids playing baseball, right? And it's a ragtag pickup game. And then this massive $1 million motor coach pulls up, and the New York Yankees walk off the bus. And then, we say, hey, Both teams are playing baseball, man. Just let the outcomes be the outcomes. Let them play ball, right? That's that counter dark narrative around economic development. And it's like they're playing baseball. Baseball is baseball. It's like, of course it's not, right? We got to coach them up. And then you can, if you do that, if you really invest, and that's what we've done. Our process is agnostic, so to speak. Nobody gets additional or preferential treatment for any particular consideration. But if we've really invested to make it a fair fight, you can then sit back and say, okay, let it play out. And in our case, the way it's played out is, I think at the moment, if you wanted to pick a group that's getting, disproportionately or is kind of aggregating grant wins, it's Black women founders. They're doing really well in our programs, right? And then bringing up rural the way we are now, that's super intentional. And I'm sorry, I just realized I'm talking more than I intended. I really want to hear this from you.
No, man. I think it's important. I think the conversation that I think you are leading is understanding that diversity. It's Tom. It's so interesting. It's like we want diversity in everything else in our life, but economic development, right? I tell people, like, I was fortunate enough to be alive in the 60s and 70s and to see, and my favorite sport was basketball, to see most of the great basketball players at that time, or some of them, were white guys. And then you saw in the 80s and the 90s, it transitioned to let's find diverse talent to win games. And people went to New York and went to other places in Chicago and found these ballers.
Pippen and Jordan.
Right. Social economic differences, but they could play. And then they started winning. Now this is the amazing part, Tom. Then we're like in the 2000s, right? 2010, 15, 16. Now some of the greatest players in the NBA are international. So we value diversity to win, but we don't value diversity to share.
Oh, that's profound. We value diversity to win, but not to share.
And I think that's amazing as I watch this play out that, the best talent. So when people talk to me about meritocracy, I go, yeah, we practice meritocracy in everything. There's this thought that lack of diversity is going to bring about better outcomes. And I always say, show me where. Gumbo is good when it's more diverse. Educational opportunities are better when you get more diversity of perspective.
What does your investment broker tell you? Put it all in one stock?
Right. So experiences, visiting different parts of the world and the country gives you a diverse perspective, which allows you to be a better leader. So I think if we would just apply the same commonsensical mentality to what in our life, to all portions of our lives, and to believe the outcomes will be greater, it allows for us to see that the economic inclusion or the ecosystem gets better and richer when we do that. And in America, we will not be competitive as a country with India, China, and Russia, knowing that they're going to capitalize and mobilize their population if we don't do the same thing with our talent. Because, like sports, the some of the best basketball players in our country are from international. Some of the best baseball players in our country are international. Some football players are international. Hockey, soccer, and I can go on and on. Tennis. And so golf, I mean, people are realizing to be competitive, it's around being able to recognize that we have to expand our opportunities to get to the best outcome.
Yeah, no, I obviously we're in wild agreement on that. And, I think in like current times that are somewhat cynical, I had this epiphany the other day that we need to be, one way to push back is to remain optimistic, but optimism is an act of courage these days. It really is. because
Yes.
I think that the forces out there that are dragging us back, creating this chaos, creating this, mistrust, creating all this heartache for, like, immigrant population, all of those negative things. It's a feature. It's not a bug. It's intentional, right? So that we retreat, and those that would stand for human flourishing, that would want to say and make the argument that it's in everybody's best interest, right? But you get back to immigration and entrepreneurship. It's a field that I'm familiar with. All the years I spent at the Kauffman Foundation, reams of data. Immigrants are 2.5 times more entrepreneurial than native born Americans. So if you think we would be better served by having more companies starting, growing, creating jobs, right? You would say from foreign policy, let's encourage immigration, not discourage immigration.
Right. And I tell you, I 100% agree. And so one of my quotes that I really value in leadership is like power. Power is not controlling other people. Power is really controlling yourself. Trying to control other people is the first sign that you're entirely out of control. Controlling others is what weak people think power looks like, right? And so I think it's so important that we use power to help people, to help policies, to help profits that we can give back to people. And we use that rotating wheel to really become a flywheel for our economy. And that's what I think of ecosystems. And so it's never, sometimes people try to play this ecosystem entrepreneurial game by talking really specific to things, but it's really a bigger picture. And being able to press on all of the levers are going to get you the greater outcome. So we need our supportive services and our politicians and our nonprofits and our governments and our people all to be working with a shared vision. And because we have a lacking of a shared vision, we can't have shared prosperity. Because if you and I don't have a shared vision, prosperity means something different to you and me. But if we can have a shared vision, we can talk about how we can get shared prosperity and looking at it as an economic driver for opportunity.
I like, obviously, I like a lot of that. I'm gonna pick at the word vision, shared vision, for just a second. As a grant making entity that we are, right? It is not uncommon for people to look at the things we do fund and the things we don't fund, and to be critiqued. It's occupational hazard. Every time we announce our grant winners, we say no to a lot more people than we can say yes to. And so
Right.
everybody's got an opinion on that. I'm being a little bit of a word nerd here and thinking, like, is it shared vision or is it shared values? Because to me, vision is how we express our values, and that can be different. If we share values and say, like, we want people to be living lives, self-empowered lives of economic resilience and economically emancipated, so to speak, I think there's multiple ways to skin that cat. And I don't know, I might be just going off on a tangent in this regard, but I couldn't agree more with, the concept of what you're saying. So then it begs the question: how is it that we have allowed people in corridors of power that don't share our vision or don't share our values to be in such positions of authority that make such life impacting decisions around economic development and broader issues in society? Is that just learned helplessness by the electorate? Like, is it the futility? Is it that, again, that feature, not a bug, that we just beat everybody down into submission so that they feel helpless to change and then just become complacent? Or
I would challenge you, Tom, to really think around what people, I think you have to common size the economic development language. I'm not sure it's common size. I don't think everyone understands this economic development the same way. And that sometimes I think it's limited to what you know. You're bright and you have a more expansive opportunity to speak of economic development from a nascent standpoint to a much more advanced standpoint. And I would say many politicians who represent people, who set policy, that makes someone a lot of money and profits may or may not understand the full need of the full value or the full conversation of economic development. And so I don't disagree with you. Like, I really agree with you, but I need you to understand when I meet people and they talk about economic development, I kind of go through a mind share of understanding what do they see as economic development because sometimes it's very siloed.
That's why I started this podcast asking you, what does economic development mean?
Yeah, they may say it's jobs, it's jobs, it's jobs. I'm like, no, it can't just be jobs because then I have to go, what kind of jobs? Are they well paying jobs? What's the criteria to get the jobs? What kind of education did you have? What are you going to do? Who's hiring for these jobs? Are you bringing people in from out of town to really fill these 4,000 jobs that you said you're bringing to the community? Because if you're bringing down 2,500 people from New York, then you're really only hiring 1,500 people. It's like you have to go through that kind of forensic
Yep.
analysis to indicate what's the differential value proposition from having an economic development strategy that would include humans, workforce, and community. And I tell, when I'm doing consulting work, working with corporations, I try to help them to understand their community benefits package. What's your community benefits package and how does that create value for your business? Economic value. And so that you don't just say, I'm doing something to the community, you're doing it with the community. And then you help them to understand by doing it with the community, you get a value proposition that's greater than your competitor who's just trying to do it to the community. Make a lot of money and say, I'm going to give you a $100,000 check. I'm like, no, don't do that for 1 year. I'm saying make a lot of money, give them $200,000 check over 5 years and watch your value proposition go up and watch other things happen. But we have to equate it based on the industry.
I think you're I mean, not surprisingly, I agree. But I think you're also talking about a certain enlightened understanding, right? Enlightened self-interest, which is very uncommon. And I can say that again from perspective as a grant making institution and others, right? When we started the Black Entrepreneurship Council, one of the things that is very uncommon in grant making, right? You have, so think of big name, and I'll just pick on Gates because I'll probably never see a dime from him. And I don't mean to cast aspersions on Mr. Gates, but like these big ones, right? When you have the money, there's this condition called the assumption of complete knowledge, right? So I have the money. You're asking me for the money. So I must know something that you don't know. So let me tell you what you need to do in order to get the money from me, right? And in the Black entrepreneurship space in particular, and I want to give Talib Gravesman credit for this because I think he's the first one that said it to me. Is like, we're the most over mentored but underfunded, group of individuals out there. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. So when we formed the Black Entrepreneurship Council, what we had to say is have a certain amount of humility to say, we are not going to presume that we know how to accelerate Black entrepreneurship in the state of North Carolina. I mean, our goal is through the work of the council is to make North Carolina the best state in the country for Black founders to start and grow high impact companies. Okay. So that's a goal and a value we share and have. But how we do that, we have to know that our role is find money, convene the meeting, take the notes, make it as easy for the participants, but let the council set the direction. That sounds simple, but that is hard for organizations to do. And the bigger you are, the harder it is to do because you are saying, hey, you're confessing your ignorance. You're confessing your lack of lived experience, right? I mean, I grew up in a first generation immigrant German household. I'm not going to expect you to be able to extol the virtues of Königsberg Eclipse the way my mom made them.
Yep.
Because you probably never had them, right? But if we impaneled some people that can give you some advice on that, then we can figure that out. And of course, I'm trying to be silly on actually a serious point. And I think that's an area where we can innovate and hopefully start cracking away at the sides of the current economic development model. What I'm hopeful in is that, and then people like you give me that hope when I see you using your platform, when I see you using your access to be in the room, right? To first of all hear for the benefit of others, but then to speak for the benefit of all.
Amen. And I would challenge you in your grant making process to break the stereotype of going through I call it the oppression Olympics, when you got to show how much you're oppressed and why I need your money to get through. And then we all try to talk about how we got one arm, one finger, one leg, one knee, and we're fighting the fight in our community. Let people be on the positive side of changing the language from the oppression Olympics to the overcoming Olympics. Like, I've overcome. And I think that mindset matters, because that allows for you to have, I think, a greater economic outcome, because your mindset is operating in the optimistic space, not in a deficiency space.
Amen, brother. I mean, that's what we do, and we're trying to operate in that regard. You know, it can be a fine line, right? And I'll give you an example in a very practical sense. It's a little less esoteric. You know, when Helene did its thing to Western North Carolina, understandably, there was a call out from folks and partners we have out there that, like, oh, NCID, you got to come in and help. You got to do something in this recovery effort, right? And sympathetically, like, we thought about it and we convened, and, you know, we donated to some relief efforts out there, you know, personally and at the corporate level. But at the end of the day, we had to also understand that it's not our lane. It's not what we're built to do, right? And we have to be able to say, listen, we know that the entrepreneurial ecosystem's taking a hit. It's our job that they have a flourishing ecosystem to go into. But there are organizations 1,000 times bigger with, you know, 1,000x more resources that have been built to do disaster recovery. So we have to rely on those organizations to do what they're supposed to do so that we can continue doing what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and thank you for doing it, because it takes a little bit of courage to do the work that you do. And I think you understand the importance of that courage has the word rage in it.
Trust me, the team here knows. I've said this 100 times if I've said it once. If you're not pissing some people off in this work, you're not pushing hard enough, and you're not pushing for enough change, right? You're not trying to have enough good in the world. So listen, my producer, Christian, who I can see through the window, is giving me this signal that we have to land this plane. So I'm going to do that. There's a little thing I've been doing in these podcasts, and it's apropos because you mentioned very early in this discussion social capital. So if you had to guess, how many mutual connections do you think you and I have on LinkedIn?
Probably 1,000.
Well, that's ambitious, but it's up there. It's 409.
Okay.
And when I look at how many mutual connections, I mean, you and I both have thousands of connections, so it should be in the hundreds. But it's always makes me feel good when I'm, you know, talking to a friend and I see stuff like that, and then I can, you know, I don't have to scroll like Instagram and watch reels.
Right.
I'll scroll through our mutual contacts,
Right.
and I'll play this game like, I'm surprised Farad's connected to him or her as well. I wonder what that story is, right? Because it's usually somebody that's out of market for both of us.
Right.
Right. It's like somebody in San Francisco that we both have a connection to, right? But I also know we've been pretty decent world travelers. I mean, my work has taken me literally from Bangladesh to Brazil and Africa and all over the world. So it's not surprising. But it's a point you made earlier, right? If you've experienced other things, you understand and value human flourishing more and why it's important, because you have that perspective. I think sometimes if I'm trying to be generous in these closing thoughts to people that oppose doing this kind of work, I think some of it's just good old fashioned hate and racism. And that just, you know, we just have to fight and rage against that. I think for some could be won over with just expanding their worldview a little bit, right? And go out and get uncomfortable, you know, or as Napoleon Wallace had us all together for his Good Trouble conference a little while ago, right? Just go out there and risk a little bit, and then find out that we are so more in common than we are different. And when you understand that, we can return to empathy, because I think one of the tools of those that are dividing us is that they started by killing empathy.
Yeah.
And once we stop having empathy for one another, it's easy to start seeing people as the other. So let's fight to bring empathy back.
Yeah, man. I think it's important that we love people. I mean, I do believe is that we need to love people, but I think it's also an opportunity for us at this time for us that to understand that we learn from everyone who passes through our lives. Everyone. Some lessons are painful, and some of them are painless, but they're all priceless.
And some are downright pleasure and priceless.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna say, I don't know how to end that any better than a Farad Ali-ism than that. I'm thinking as Christian is going to have to cut this up, there's going to be just multiple very poignant sound bites on that. So listen, like I said, it was a real joy. I was looking forward to today's conversation for some time. I look forward to bumping into you every chance I get. If I can ever be of service to you and the good work that you're doing, please, I hope you know all you need to do is reach out.
Yeah, man, just continue the good trouble. It has good results.
Stay connected with NC Idea on LinkedIn and Facebook, and subscribe to our newsletter for all the latest as we celebrate our 20th year. Catch new episodes of Ecosysteming every other Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in and being a part of this thing of ours.